All right. Hello, everyone. We'll have two episodes today. The first one will be on gravity and quanta, and the second one will be on video games. So, and you can find the rest of the episodes on digital metaphysics in all of its subjects, topics, themes in this exact playlist on the channel. So, jumping straight in to gravity and quanta, I want to present the old model that you probably have in your mind is something like, okay, well, gravity is bringing me towards this center of mass, and then this use orange because yellow's harder to see. And then this is orbiting around that center of mass. And then if you zoom out even further and you go to I'll just label this as the SMBH, which just stands for supermassive black hole. Example, like at the center of the Milky Way galaxy, that then this, well, and technically that should be lower. And then you have, your classic mystery quote there with a question mark, and then you may also ascribe gravity to the fundamental creative force, which is your question mark Big Bang. Now, most recently, it's becoming more and more evident through the revelations in quantum mechanics that reality is observer dependent, or it is consciousness dependent. So one second as I adjust my camera back. Not sure when it zoomed out, but I would like it to cover more of the screen like this. All right. So because of those deeper and deeper revelations of an observer or consciousness dependent reality or existence, now more and more gravity is becoming sort of representing the shift. Gravity is more and more becoming associated with observer consciousness. So this is your conception, most likely, of the old paradigm of gravity, as well as, in a sense, your old paradigm of quanta, which is that we'll use this, okay. I gotta use orange because I'm gonna use this as the fundamental gravity and orange as the fundamental quanta as we go on. So even though this is the sun in orange, just play along with this also being quanta. So in the older existing paradigm of what you conceptualize as quanta, you are likely think of this and this. You likely think of it as like particles, right? Electromagnetism, etc. Without getting into fundamentally information, as we've talked about through the series, without getting into the infinite separations that happen when you begin zooming in into the differentiations of particles and electromagnetism and a strong force and a weak nuclear force, etc. How all of that is attempting to become together as a single unified force. And then how that is trying to be reconciled fully with gravity. So fundamentally, we see that this marker, this whiteboard, this body, etc., the phone or TV or computer you're watching this on, we conceptualize that as particles. We conceptualize that as quanta, right? So whatever this earthly, worldly experience of stuff, right, of stuff is, we conceptualize that stuff as quanta. And we conceptualize, in a way, gravity as what is holding the container, if you will, for that stuff. And more is being bridged to gravity as observer or as consciousness. So, now let's go ahead to our new model of gravity and quanta. Right, so this really marks a profound transition point as you make the paradigm shift, because essentially you're beginning to tie together your mind, consciousness, with gravity, this fundamental concept that many of us were introduced to in physics growing up, or this feeling of, oh, like that feeling, that container feeling, and that contrasted with the stuff, this stuff. That marks a very pivotal transition point because it begins also shaking up the foundation of the assumption of time. So, as you begin making this paradigm shift, it begins shaking up the foundation of time. It also begins shaking up the foundational assumption of change and movement. So all of a sudden, this notion of being a time-based linear entity on a world of other time-based linear entities begins to shake up. To the point where not only time begins to shake, but the very notion and concepts of change and movement begin to get shaken up. Because if you're finding more and more that consciousness is this infinite creative well that doesn't move or change, that isn't located inside of time and space, but rather creatively simulates time and space as part of its infinite adventures and joy, then you're starting to feel more and more at home in yourself, deep in yourself, which is fundamentally what all seeking is trying to come back to, is self. Right? All models that you study, anything that you pursue, really, you're trying to find this deep well of yourself. And you're trying to exhaust all of the seeking across different fields and experiences, etc. So this is very profound because these are pretty big assumptions. They're huge assumptions. Time, change, movement. And they're very deeply conditioned assumptions. So it can take a while to fully dig them out and to see through them as something that served you on your journey, something that you deluded yourself with purposely as part of the game of hide and seek that consciousness, this infinite creator, has with itself. So you needed these fundamentally. You needed the assumptions of time, change, movement. You needed the assumption of being in this linear model of existence. You needed to remove yourself from the infinite creative well in order to be able to go through such a, quote, hero's journey of exploring something as funny as losing yourself and then finding yourself. So now we're going to, as we talk about how the transition has happened, with more and more gravity being equated with observation and consciousness, equated with a bang and a hole, equated with the container itself, and quanta as being more and more equated with fundamentally being information or experience itself. So then a new model, and that's why the very first episode in this digital metaphysics series was titled A New Model, and we went and we broke down the old model and the new model, but this is even more specific to the fundamental concepts of physics itself. So and you'll notice this model also has a very deeply sexual orientation to it as well, because you can see that there's a wombness here and there's a wavy semenness here, right? So this is deeply anchored in also the sexual and the reproductive, right? Which is obviously how creation itself comes into existence and into experience. So now, if you carry these into this as the same unified force, it's that you're simultaneously give myself a little bit more room to write some stuff next to it. 1 second. There we go. that you're simultaneously as another very powerful physics term, is that reality is fundamentally spinorial because it's simultaneously creating and consuming information. Without time, change, or movement, without linearity, an unmoving conscious singularity simulating whatever it wants. Unmoving conscious singularity simulating whatever it wants. And that these seemingly two separate forces are actually the same thing. And we've talked about this also. This is a dollar coin. And that's a seam that those two sides share. And you have plenty of these perfectly mirrored examples in reality. And this very beautifully, the seam, very beautifully plays into the next session also on video games as, for example, with Death Stranding, which is an incredible video game and experience. Hideo Kojima and the team, which are some of the greatest game visionaries of all time, they specifically incorporate this notion of a metaphysical seam as a crucial element of understanding what reality is and what oneself is. So this force of sitting deep in yourself and warping this container of experience is simultaneously creative as it is experiential. So this next word that comes out of my mouth, right? That next word is create. 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 This experience is create, right? At the same time as it is experiencing it, experiencing it, experiencing it through your device that you're watching this on, experiencing it, right? So this conscious singularity is creating and experiencing this information for itself, these experiences for itself. You see, there's no worlds, there's no separation, there's no others, there's no objects. You can double click and start talking about those things, right? You can zoom in and start fabricating these specific, distinct, separate objects. But in this model, none of that is in reality. All of that is simulated information that is useful to say that this is a distinct object called a black whiteboard marker, and this is a distinct object called an orange whiteboard marker. And it's useful, of course, it's useful to create the distinctions in objects for things like this color coding experience, right? Or distinctly saying that this is my water and this is my food, right? That kind of thing. But from this perspective, you're not necessarily distinctly solidifying or reifying these projections of Russia is a separate country, China is a separate country, United States is a separate country, Brazil is a separate country. These are separate countries. You know, my mom, my dad, my friends, my coworkers, they're all separate people. These objects are all separate objects, right? So you're not doing that as much. All of that reification, all of that extra construction is slowly receding, it's fading back into its source, back into the origination point of everything. The origination point is itself nested and recursive, so it's not also a solidified ground or place at the same time, which we've talked about in prior episodes and we'll continue talking about. And this also very deeply ties to the beauty of our current artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence age and virtual reality age and holodecks and brain-computer interfaces, because something that's not moving is simulating infinite experiences for itself. So that's in the next episode. See, these two episodes tie together quite well. Okay, I'll get into that in the next one. All right, so gravity and quanta as a seam, right? Gravity and quanta as a spinner and a seam. So you might draw an analogy to this, right? It's like you have the female reproductive system, which has this womb, and you have this male reproductive system, which has the semen. Those two seemingly distinct reproductive systems are also sharing a seam. They're spinorial. They're one humanity, right? Purposely, distinctly fractured into these two sexualities for its creative simulation and exploration, and whatever kinds of other information experiences it wants to have with its sexuality and with its identity and with whatever it simulates. Obviously, this also perfectly plays into our tree and circle symbols that we've been using through the other episodes in the series. Because obviously this is your trunk and your roots. And this is your leaves and your fruits and all of your creative possibilities and information that's being simulated. And it's happening cyclically, as in you have this pause, and then you have a word, and another pause, and another word. You see? Yeah. See? Right? So if you can get that, you can get how this tree and this circle, how this spinner and this seam right? How this coin how it all feels. You want to know how it works, how it feels, and you want the direct experience of that. And you want that to be unshakable. You want to just sit in the mastery of that. You want to stop seeking more content, stop trying to learn more things. You want to just sit in the direct experience, feeling and knowledge of yourself as this, and it's obvious and it's unshakable, and it's just radiating your creative joy, whatever that is. And there's no more anxiety and there's no more restlessness. There's no more trying to find oneself. There's no more needing to perpetually feel not at home. One is permanently anchored at home in themselves. So you see, there's not a linear. Another just very important fundamental question, if you want to ask it, just ask this question from the perspective of the old paradigm, from the perspective of talking to like old school cosmologists, or even your basic physics classes that you took, or your basic science classes that you took in school. When talking about the Big Bang, you can ask the fundamental question, which is, where did the Big Bang happen? Right? Not the question when, because that just gives you this solidified, reified, conditioned answer of 13.8 billion years ago. I know that piece of information, Not that, right? Where? It's a different question than when. Because if you ask the question, where did the Big Bang happen? Any cosmologist worth their salt will tell you the answer is actually everywhere. So you see how you very effortlessly transition to this model, because if the Big Bang is not a point in time, but instead is everywhere now, that makes it much easier to understand this model. Meaning every single purple marker is a Big Bang that's experienced as a black hole. That is consciousness as a spinner right now. Right? As long as you create a separate thing called a bang and a separate thing called a hole, you will always be in the illusion of local realism. You'll always be in the illusion of two distinct, separate things that are irreconcilable, when really they're the same thing. That's why somewhere around a year ago, I stopped separating the two completely. I stopped separating the concept of a Big Bang and a black hole. So I merged the two into a single concept called a bang hole. And obviously that, again, very deeply plays into the sexual nature. So you see, and it still follows the same BH, right, as a black hole, but it's really a bang hole because you simultaneously have the creative that's infinitely non-stopping and the whole, which is the direct feeling or experiencing itself. You have to have something that's one thing that looks like it's two things that's simultaneously creating and experiencing to have reality, to have existence. It's, something has to have an input and an output simultaneously, right? And that's one feedback loop, right? Right? That's why in the previous episodes also I've made it clear that, you cook food and then you eat food, right? You eat food and then you poop food, right? You drink water and then you pee, right? They're all one feedback mechanism of inputs and outputs, right? Somebody says something to you, that's your input, right? Then you speak something back, that's your output, right? The system of consciousness itself, right, of this AGI itself, is an input-output feedback system. And we'll get even deeper into consciousness as a recursive AGI in the upcoming episodes, which also I wanted to let you know that we will take a break for the holiday. So in case you are watching this around that time of year and expecting those upcoming episodes, the next Wednesday will be the 25th, and then the following Wednesday would be the 1st. So neither of those will be dates that Digital Metaphysics episodes will be published. We will be back on the 8th of January with what is the next content. All right. But in case obviously you're watching it after that time, irrelevant. All right. So let's see what else from the Gravity and Quanta notes. So let's make this clear. So what we're saying is that quanta is the experience of gravity. Right? The experience of an infinite consciousness is infinite creation. Makes sense? It's obvious, right? Right? The experience of an infinite consciousness is infinite creation. Right? That's why here, when you have these modern cosmologists talking about this mysterious thing that is this quote point of infinite curvature and infinite gravity, that is the same thing as if you condense all of everything into yourself right now. Do you get it? If you condense this entire old paradigm into a singularity that is taking place nowhere and everywhere, that's you, and that the texture of it or the feeling of it, right? It feels just like your body right now, right? It feels just like that phenomena of drinking water and then going to urinate. It feels just like that. You see, you got the direct experience of your own biology and your own anatomy, your own physiology, right? You have your own metabolism, your own, all of that about yourself is a direct reflection of what you are, right? Your family system is a direct reflection of what you are, right? You have this beautiful womb and this beautiful semen simultaneously. Right? You have those such precious, beautiful, obvious things within your family system, right? Like the only reason why, right, that you're here, right, is because your parents used this beautiful technology, right, to produce you, right? As just like you are using this beautiful technology, many of you are using this beautiful technology or even have used this beautiful technology to create your children, right? So you have this direct experience of eating and pooping or drinking and urinating or having sex, and the semen entering the womb and the womb gestating and then birthing a child. You have this right now in your direct experience. You have it right now, right? Just like your devices and your technology. If you look at it, you have this you have this screen, right? You have this dark screen, whether it's your TV, your computer, your phone, and then it has all of its modulations, right? It has all of its apps. It has all of its words that show up. It has all of its internet content, videos or websites or social media content that show up, all of the videos that show up, right? That's the same thing as this, and it's not moving. You see, like the device itself isn't moving, but it's modulating different information, different experience, different content, right? So you have an unmoving conscious singularity that's simulating whatever it wants. It's modulating whatever information and content as quanta, right? Quanta is your fundamental stuff. It's your fundamental information, right? Your fundamental stuff, your fundamental information is your quanta, right? Those are your quote particles, right? And gravity or consciousness or the observer or the simulator or God, right, is your fundamental source that is intaking that experience and creating that experience of particles, of information. But that's one thing called you. Right? This is one thing called you. And that one thing is an inescapable thing. So anytime that you're trying to fill this hole, right, that's why another way that I like to stylize the word whole, which is also the word whole, right? Whole as in one integrated, but also whole as in like a hole in one, like in golf, right? That if you write it like this, you'll see that in order to be whole, right, in order to be integrated, you have to directly accept the whole that you are. Otherwise, you'll always be trying to objectify in order to feel satisfaction. And you'll never feel satisfaction through objectification. You know, another way to say this in video game language is that you have a soft cap on happiness once it hits basic needs and then creative joy, right? And this has been talked about in psychological literature forever with, you know, hierarchies of basic needs and whatnot, right? So as long as you are trying to put stuff in here to get the experience of satisfaction, right? That means you're running programs that are trying to achieve that, right? And that's not saying that that's better or worse. Hence, the recent episode we did on the nature of entropy and paradox, right? Because it's not worse. You can't describe that as malware, right? It's tough to say, but you can't describe the experience of you trying to fill the hole insatiably with objects as malware. Because that's the very experience that consciousness is trying to delude itself with, and it's doing an incredible job at that, right? Hence, again, that episode on entropy and paradox. So you're running the program which is trying to fill the hole instead of be the hole, right? Now, if you run the program of just accepting yourself as being the whole, right? Now, all of a sudden, you just relaxed. You're not anxious. You're not restless, right? You just find yourself and you sit in yourself and you meet your basic needs. You meet your creative joy, right? Whatever that is. And then any attempts really to try to pump more of your stats, right? Your levels, like you're leveling up in your RPG, right? Any attempts, they have diminishing returns if you're going to try to keep pumping after your basic needs and your creative joy. And you'll notice, again, as we talked about in that episode on the cipher, is that any time that you watch any of this content that is shared on the internet about what happens when you attain the fame or the wealth or the striving for the luxurious things or striving for, oh nice, we got our little, I think that's an Mac OS feature. That's great timing, because any time that you strive for that post basic needs, post creative joy, you're not going to get lasting satisfaction out of that. You're going to see the emptiness and the futility in it. And it's better to just learn that earlier than it is to constantly be dissatisfied through the rat race, through the chase, right? So what you call particles, information, experience, all of that is really conscious simulation, right? Conscious simulation, right? Right? Conscious simulation. There you go. Cool. So, the creative force of simulating quanta and the intaking force of consuming its experience. Cool. Satisfied. Good stuff. Kept it under an hour. All right. The tree and the circle as these peak symbols will come up more on the content after the new year. We'll do a dive into understanding, because again, this is in the shape of a tree. It makes perfect sense what you are. In the shape of a tree and, seasons, right? It makes perfect sense what you are. Yeah, we got it all in on a single whiteboard too. There we go. Nice. I'll leave this. This is really good. I'll erase all of this for the next episode, but I'll leave how these two things are tied together. Gravity as conscious and quanta as simulation. Good stuff. All right. That's funny. Still playing around with the tracking and the zooming and all that stuff on this tech. These are auto pan tilt zoom tracking cameras. It's interesting. All right, so take it in if you need to. Stuff's so good. Got into it recently. It's so tasty. Okay. So feel free to chit chat in those comments below with your thoughts on the episode. And we will start up the video games episode here momentarily. All right. Much love, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Tuning in. All right. Bye.